Hello, all the team participants are there.
Team code 553 speaker and researcher are here, sir. Another speaker is yet to join, and remaining other team is yet to join.
Are you petitioner or defendant? Prosecution or defend?
Defendant, sir.
Defendant. Prosecution is with. बता दो मैम. Hello. So guys, I am telling some brief rules of moot court. I am audible.
Yes, sir.
So I am briefing some rules of moot courts. First is each team will have a maximum of 30 minutes to present their oral submission, including time for rebuttal. Second, maximum of 5 minutes can be reserved for the rebuttal, which can only be reserved only for any one speaker. Third, team are requested to notify the division of time between the two speakers as well as time for rebuttal at the beginning. Fourth, no speaker will be permitted to address the court for more than 20 minutes. Fifth, teams will be intimated on every 20 and 30 minutes. Sixth, judges at their discretion may extend oral argument time up to maximum of 10 minutes per team. Seventh, team will strictly maintain anonymity during the complete session and also while referencing to any case law using present now option. 8. At the time when one participant is speaking, others are expected to keep their microphone on mute. This is a brief introduction, brief rules of moot court. Now I am introduce Mr. Nato Rai as a judge. He is enrolled with Bar 2007. Area of practice IPR law, commercial law, civil law. Major panel working for foreign brands like Karcher, Harvard, Danjek. Indian brands Machine, BSNL. Achievement successful protected. These brand firms have associated office at Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, and Shimla. Mr. LLB from Delhi University. These are Go.
I'm sorry, but the voice is not clear, sir. No, sir, you're not audible, sir. Your mic is off.
Am I audible to everyone here?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I request every prosecution and defendant to kindly please tell their timings so that we can, in which you're going to contest your case. Both speaker one and speaker two kindly provide that.
For the defendant side, both the speakers are requiring 15 minutes each.
Okay, and what's there for the prosecution side?
The prosecution didn't show up, ma'am.
Prosecution is not there.
No, ma'am.
Okay. We'll just wait for 5 minutes and let me just reconnect to the prosecution side by the time. It's the discretion of the court by the time they can hear the defendant in that case. Honorable judges, you may hear both the since the prosecution is not here, you may hear the defendant by that time. Prosecution defendant are hereby requested to start their contention. And everyone kindly please switch on their cameras. We are recording the entire session. With the honorable permission, judges' permission, I requested the judges to address so that we can start the competition now. Judges, am I audible to you?
Yeah, you can proceed.
Okay.
But I think Mr. Natwarlal has left.
Is
Shall
there,
we
any,
move?
is there any confusion, sir? Network is made.
It can be started now.
So good afternoon, respected judges. Counsel Shantanu and my co-counsel Siri are appearing on behalf of the defense in the case State NIA versus Samir and others. The counsel seeks permission to address this bench as your lordships.
Excuse me, hello. Is the prosecution side?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Let the prosecution.
Let the prosecution start the first.
Yes, sir. Can we just wait for a second? Our researcher is facing slight technical issues. They will be with us in a second.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Apologies for the inconvenience.
Okay.
The researcher is present. We can begin.
Greetings to the bench. The counsel inquires if the counsel is audible and visible. This is the counsel appearing on behalf of the prosecution in the case of State versus Samir and others. The counsel would like to refer to the bench as your lordship.
Please go ahead.
Excuse me, ma'am.
If your lordship is well versed with the facts.
All teams are there. Hello.
Yes.
All teams are there.
Yes, your lordship.
Speaker 1, 2 is researchers for prosecution and speaker 1, 2 and researcher for defense.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Your lordship, the counsel seeks permission to start all over again.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, your lordship. Now, greetings to the bench. This is the counsel appearing on behalf of the prosecution in the case of State versus Samir and others. The council would like to refer the bench as your lordship.
Please.
If your lordship is well versed with the facts and jurisdiction of the case, the council would like to move to the issues at hand.
Please explain.
Statement of facts. Samir and Monu were detained during the search by special cell of the Delhi police in Farakka Express with currency which was later opined to be fake Indian currency notes. On further examination, in the examination with the police, they mentioned the involvement of Kalu Mama and the other two accused, Peter and Sohail. The charge sheet in furtherance of the confession of the three accused demonstrate that Kalu Mama collected the fake currency from Sohail for sending it to Pulwama through Samir and Monu, where it had to be collected by Peter for carrying out bomb blast on the Indian convoy on 15th August. They have relied upon the evidence of CDR, geographical mapping, and witness who saw the co-accused Sohail and Kalu Mama together in public space. Now, the accused have been held. The accused are in the charge sheet. It has been held under Section 120B, 489B, 489C, Section 121, 123, and 201 of IPC, and Section 16, 17, 18, and 20 of UAPA. Now, moving to the statement of jurisdiction, the Honorable Court has jurisdiction to entertain the instant matter under Section 26 of CRPC 1973 and under Section 13 of NIA. Now, the Council would seek permission to move to the issues at hand.
Please.
The council shall deal with the issues in a twofold manner. Firstly, the council will deal with the guilt of Monu and Samir, and secondly, the guilt of Kalu Mama. The first contention is regarding the liability of Monu and Samir under Section 489B and 489C. Now, Section 489B refers to the involvement of any person in transaction of counterfeit with knowledge or reasonable belief. And Section 489C refers to the possession or the intention to use the same as counterfeit currency with genuine knowledge or reasonable belief. Both the sections involve the knowledge or mens rea on part of the accused. Knowledge or having reasonable belief, which is held to be mens rea, is important as it has been reiterated in the case of Uma Shankar versus State of Chhattisgarh. Now, in order to establish the mens rea, the council shall be dealing with it in a fourfold manner. Now, it is necessary to note that under Section 15 of Indian Evidence Act, facts which bear question whether or not it was accidental or intentional, when there is a question particular to this, the particular knowledge or intention of the fact that such act formed a part of the series of similar occurrences in which each of the person doing the act was concerned is relevant. Now, for moving the first contention in regards to proving the mens rea, so in moot proposition, page number 17, paragraph 17.10, if the lordship could refer to that, in the examination by special cell of the Delhi police, Samir disclosed that he, along with Monu, used to receive consignments from Kalu and travel in general coach of train as it was safe. The two accused had hid the counterfeit currency bag in the secret section of the bag. This mannerism is reflective of their knowledge and intention to hide. Such mannerism was referred in the case of Karan Kumar K. Khanda versus the state of Maharashtra, wherein the accused has struck up bags containing fake currency near their abdomen, under the pants. The court concluded, in fact, that the manner indicates that they were aware the notes with them was counterfeit currency. Now, the second contention regarding mens rea, in the case of one interrogation, the accused disclosed that out of the consignment of rupees 5 lakhs, FICN were to be delivered in Pulwama to Peter. So it shows that they had been knowingly taking the FICN and had mens rea to give it to Peter. Now, under Section 30 of the Indian Evidence Act, it states that the court may consider the confession of co-accused as evidence. It may be noted that the confession of the co-accused must implicate himself as well as some other accused when they are jointly tried but for different offences. In the same, the confession is not relevant if they are independently convicted. Now, the third contention regarding mens rea. The CDR or the call detailed records and the location of mobile in the moot proposition, page number 19, paragraph 17.16, if your lordship could refer to it, shows clear evidence of Samir and Monu with Kalu and Peter. The Supreme Court, in the case of K. Veluswamy versus N. Palaniswamy, considered the telephonic conversation to be of essential value and came to the conclusion that CDR records could be a valid evidence according to Section 3 of the Indian Evidence Act and Section 2 of the IT Act. The Supreme Court also observed that the electronic recorded calls has evidentiary value. Now, the fourth contention, as per the facts, when the investigation started in the first place, Monu and Samir were held, and then Peter was at first absconding and then committed suicide out of fear of conviction. Also, Sohail is also absconding, who is one of the conspirators. Now, lastly, Kalu Mama made statement regarding India not being worth to live and call it a country of intolerance. He also admitted the link of Sohail with Lashkar-e-Taiba. The blast code Dulhan ko sajane ka waqt aa gaya has been reiterated thrice in the mood proposition, twice by Kalu and once by Samir, wherein he also states the fact that there is some conspiracy. That has been said by Kalu Mama himself, that there is some conspiracy and the secret blast code. Now, in the case of Sahu versus State of UP, the court relied upon the accused who was charged with the murder of his daughter-in-law, whom he was quarreling and was seen on the day of murder going out of the home saying, "I'll kill you." Now, here the same evidentiary value will hold as Kalu Mama also stated the fact that Dulhan ko sajane ka waqt aa gaya hai. Now, the Section 8 of the Indian Evidence Act, according to it, facts of preparation are relevant. To be noted, the facts highlighting the preparation of offense gains relevance after the commission of the crime. Now, here the commission of the crime refers to the fake Indian currency notes, which were taken from the custody of Sohail and Samir and Monu. And then here the preparation of the fact that they went to Kalu Mama's house will hold relevance. Now, according to Section 114 of the Indian Evidence Act, the court may presume the existence of any fact which it thinks likely to have happened in regard being had the common course of natural events, human conduct, and public and private relations of the fact to that particular case. Here, the human conduct of hiding the bag, taking it through the train, and also the CDR reports along with the tires is the natural human conduct in the process of proving the same. Now, in Section 106 of Indian Evidence Act, any fact, especially when it is within the knowledge of the person, the burden of proof is upon him. Here, in the present case, the respondents put forth that they did not have knowledge. In case they put forth that they did not have knowledge, then the onus of proof is on them to prove the same. Now, from the 5 series of arguments given in favor and the series of incidents happening thereby, from these series of incidents, it can be held that the accused had mens rea and their act was in furtherance of the common intention of transacting and intending to use the fake Indian currency note. Now, my co-counsel shall be extending on the part of the conspiracy and the common intention. Now, it is submitted that Samir and Monu are guilty under Section 489B and C and clearly had mens rea. Now, moving to the liability of Samir and Monu under Section 17 of UAPA. Now, Section 17 of UAPA essentially deals with the punishment for raising funds for terrorist activities. According to it, if any person directly or indirectly attempts to provide funds for the benefit or usage by terror groups, they'll be held guilty under this section. Now, coming to the evidentiary value of confession. Confession is an admission made at any time by the person charged with a crime, stating or suggesting the inference that he committed a crime. A confession may occur in many forms. Now, the case which was reiterated by the counsel previously in the argument, the Sahu versus State of UP, wherein the father-in-law stated in the morning itself that I'll kill you, and then further on he did that. Now, it holds the same value as in this case. Kalu Mama stated even before conducting it that Dulhan ko sajane ka waqt aa gaya, which is the blast code, which he also reiterated on the day he handed the bag to Samir and Monu. In the case of interrogation, Samir and Monu disclosed that out of the consignment of rupees 5 lakh, FICN to be delivered in Pulwama to Peter. They also mentioned that fake Indian currency notes were to be utilized for bomb blasts on Indian convoy. The mens rea has already been established by the council, and it indicates that they knowingly helped in raising funds for terrorist activities and were going to provide it to Peter so that he can utilize it in the bomb blast. Now, it has already been established that the evidentiary value of the statements of Samir and Monu have already been held and Kalu has already been held. So, it is submitted to the court that Samir and Monu are also liable under Section 17 of UAPA. Now, the council would seek permission to move to the contention regarding Kalu Mama.
Please.
Now here, when the council mentioned about accomplice, to elaborate on accomplice. An accomplice is a person who is an equal partner in crime and has also participated in the commission of the crime. In the case of Jagannath versus Emperor, it was held that an accomplice means a guilty associate or partner in crime who in some way or the other is connected with the offense in question or makes admission of facts showing that he had a conscious hand in the offense. In the present case, Kalu was involved in the transaction as he was the one who handled the bag. The fake Indian currency notes were taken from his house, which has also been stated by the to be noted, it has also been stated by the public witness Shah Rukh Khan, who confirmed their association and meeting. Now, to attract Section 133 of the Indian Evidence Act, a person must be accomplice. So, anyone who has taken the commission of crime along with another is called accomplice. So, Monu, Samir, and Kalu Mama are accomplice, and also the statements of the same can be held to of value. Now, in the case of Ismail versus Emperor, it has been held that the consciousness of the offense is important had it been corroborated by accessory after the fact. So now the fact that the fake currency notes were confiscated from the custody of Samir and Monu. Now the accessory fact being the preparation of it and the further intention of them to taking it to Peter for conducting the bomb blast. Now, moving to Section 8 of the Indian Evidence Act, the Act, as it has been reiterated by the Council in the case of Samir and Monu, the preparation is relevant in case the offense is found later on. So then, even if the offense has been committed later, then if we get facts regarding to the preparation, it will hold relevance. Now, coming to the fact that when police persons induces a person to help in finding evidence, so Section 133 gives this evidentiary value wherein it can be held to be true that the statements given that them will hold relevance. So things said or done by conspirator in reference to the common design where there is reasonable ground to believe that two or more persons have conspired together and for the purpose of proving that they were involved in it. If the prima facie evidence of existence...
Please. When this currency was sent to CFL for verification, it's a fake currency. How you find that it's a fake currency?
So, sir, it has been so in the witnesses have also reiterated the same thing. They have given witness for it, and it has also been stated that it was 5 lakhs each, 250 high quality fake Indian currency note, which having denomination of 2000, and they were total 250 notes, and each amounting to rupees 5 lakhs. So it was high value.
Okay.
Now, if the prima facie evidence of existence of a conspiracy is given and accepted, the evidence of the acts and statements made by any one of the conspirators in furtherance of the common intention. So the objects of all is admissible against all. If even one person is doing that, it will be admissible against all, as held in the case of Jayendra Saraswati Swamigal versus State of Tamil Nadu. Now, from the before stated contentions, it has been established that both Sonu, Samir, and Monu knowingly helped in raising funds for terrorist organizations through FICN. And from Section 1530-133 of IAA, their statements have held to be valid and of truthful importance. Hence, it is submitted from the above contentions that Samir, Monu, and Kalu will be liable under Section 489B and C of UAPA. Now, also the contentions regarding 17 of UAPA, Kalu Mama also reiterated the fact that he was involved and he has also given the facts, and he also gave the details of Sohail's involvement with the Lashkar-e-Taiba. So hereby, from the all above given contentions and also from the statements which can hold of relevance value from section 133 of the Indian Evidence Act, it is duly submitted before the court that Kalu Mama will be liable under Section 17 of UAPA. Now, if the Lordship is pleased with the facts and the arguments, now the council shall be requesting co-counsel to come and take over the case.
Please.
Greetings to the best. There exists a lot of static sound. Alright. Greetings to the bench. The council seeks to proceed with the following issues. Having thus proven that there existed verifiable mens rea of the possession of counterfeit currency with Samir, Monu, and Kalumama, we proceed with the fact that this possession, this guilt among the three accused of counterfeit currency, will thereafter be used to prove their guilt in criminal conspiracy, in terrorist activities, and in concealment and disappearance of evidence. This will be followed by a threefold argument. First, we shall deal with the criminal conspiracy. Criminal conspiracy has been defined by the IPC under section 120A. It has largely two components. One is the actus reus of the illegal act and the mens rea of the knowledge as well as intent of committing the illegal act. Before this, my counsel has already proven to you that the actus reus of smuggling, production, possession, and transportation of counterfeit currency did exist, and the accused are guilty of that, thus proving the element of the actus reus. Furthermore, to substantiate the claims of the existence of the mens rea, the following arguments are relied upon. Section 10, as my counsel mentioned, says that things said or done by conspirators with reference to common design, any one action is also proof of the action of the other. Examples of this with reference to the facts at hand include, should I pause? Include the fact that Kalu Mama, by the very evidence of the witness Iqbal Khan, that Kalu Mama called the country a country of intolerance. Samir and Monu were in possession of the counterfeit currency. There were repeated trips to Faraka by Samir, and the call detail records which have been proven to be admissible under section 85D of the presumption of veracity. So we move forth with the assumption that the accused were in knowledge and intent of this criminal conspiracy and of counterfeit currency. Furthermore, it has been proven that by the very nature of criminal conspiracy, the acts under criminal conspiracy are very secretive and confidential. Therefore, the prosecution cannot be expected to provide absolutely beyond reasonable doubt every single event that occurs. That is an untenable threshold to be placed on the prosecution. However, from the inferences of the circumstances and from the inferences of human conduct of the accused, namely Samir, Monu, and Kalu Mama, it can be inferred that these three accused had knowledge, intent, and the commission of the crime of the criminal conspiracy. Furthermore, if the respondents claim that Samir and Monu were not as involved or did not have the knowledge as much as Sohail and Peter did, it is submitted before the court that as under Yashpal Mittal versus the state of Punjab, each and every person in a criminal conspiracy need not have all the details of the criminal conspiracy insofar as they had the common intention, the knowledge, and the actions to further the collective outcome. In this regard as well, involvement of each individual is not required from the beginning to the end. Even if there was one individual with a more active role and more knowledge, the others are still liable under criminal conspiracy. For these reasons, the accused are liable and guilty under what is defined by criminal conspiracy under section 120A and should be punished under section 120B of the IPC and section 18 of the UAPA. If the counsel is pleased with these arguments of the guilt of the accused under criminal conspiracy, the counsel would like to proceed to terrorist activities.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Lordship. With reference to terrorist activities, we are looking at namely two statutory provisions under Section 15 of UAPA. The first one is Section 15, subclause 3A, which talks about damage to the monetary stability through production, smuggling, or circulation of high-quality counterfeit currency. As my co-counsel has already proven to you, the accused are guilty of production and circulation and possession of counterfeit currency, as well as the fact that the very quantum of the possession was 10 lakh rupees. 10 lakh rupees constitutes a high threshold which can damage the monetary stability of India. Therefore, the accused are liable for the guilt coming from Section 15, subclause 3A to damage monetary stability. The second subclause is Section 15, subclause 4, which is of damage to property intended for use by the defense of Government of India. It has been proven by the co-counsel that there was the plan to attack the Indian Army convoy on 15th of August on Independence Day. The very intent in that regard is proving a threat to the security and to the integrity and to strike terror in the minds of the people as has been defined by Section 15, thus making the accused guilty for this crime. Furthermore, the facts to substantiate this claim is that commission of these acts, the bomb blast did not have to be carried out for the accused to be liable. Commission is not required. Any act which is even likely to threaten, or any act in an attempt or abetment, is also enough to prove the guilt of the accused under Section 15. Since the council has thus proven the guilt under Section 15, the accused should be held liable under Section 16 of UAPA, which is for punishment of terrorist activities. Having proven the accused guilt in counterfeit currency, in criminal conspiracy, and in terrorist activities, the council further submits to the court that under Section 20 of the UAPA, which punishes membership of terrorist organizations, the accused have committed the terrorist act. They had the knowledge and intent to commit the terrorist act. Furthermore, as held under Arup Bhuyan versus State of Assam, where mere membership of terrorist organization is not enough proof. The individuals must do an act to create public disorder. And Samir and Monu, in their intent of counterfeit currency, in their possession of counterfeit currency, in their intent to facilitate the bomb blast attack on the Indian Army convoy, they did acts to disrupt public order and to create public disorder. Therefore, they are liable under Section 20 of UAPA, which punishes membership of terrorist organizations. The last subpoint under terrorist activities is with reference to Section 121 of the IPC, which punishes the attempt, abetment, or commission of waging of war against the government of India. A few ingredients of this section include that no specific number of persons is required. Therefore, Samir, Monu, and Kalu Mama can be individually and collectively and equally held liable for this section. Secondly, there is no distinction between principal and accessory in a crime of waging of war. This was held in Maganlal Radhakrishnan versus Emperor. Therefore, even if Sohail or Peter or Kalu Mama held more participation and were the principals in the crime, even Samir and Monu, as accessories to the crime, are liable under Section 121 for waging of war. Lastly, it is submitted before the court that all stages in this crime are to be held guilty, and therefore even if the bomb blast attack was not carried out, the attempt and abetment is substantial enough. Therefore, the three accused are to be held guilty under Section 121 of IPC for waging of war. Lastly, the council would like to proceed with the arguments of concealing of evidence and disappearance of evidence, if your lordship permits.
Yes, do it.
Thank you, Lordship. The last two sections in question is firstly of Section 123 of IPC, which is concealing with intent to facilitate design to wage war. It has been proven that all three accused had knowledge of waging of war. They were participants in waging of war, as has been proven in guilt in Section 121, and they had intent to carry out that waging of war. The fact that there existed the intention, the knowledge, and the act in itself, and there was no activity on behalf of any of the accused to approach the police authorities, the magistrates, or any of the authorities. This was held in NCT Delhi versus Navjot Sindhu, where refraining from informing the police or any authority in that regard, this constitutes an illegal omission. And the very omission of the fact of not disclosing the evidence of this crime amounts to concealing with intent to facilitate design to wage war, and therefore the accused are guilty under Section 123 of IPC. Lastly, with reference to Section 201 of the IPC, which is of disappearance of evidence of offence, it is submitted before the court that, as with reference to para 17.28 of the Moat proposition, Kalu Mama burnt down Sohail's house to avoid the finding of any evidence in regard to this investigation. This amounts to a clear and tantamount proof that Kalu Mama is liable for disappearance of evidence so as to screen offender, in this case being Sohail. Hence, it is submitted to the court that the accused are guilty on the counts of counterfeit currency under Section 489B and C and Section 17 of UAPA. They are guilty under criminal conspiracy under Section 120B of IPC and Section 18 of UAPA. They are guilty for terrorist activities under Section 16, Section 20 of UAPA and Section 121 of IPC. And lastly, they are guilty for concealment and disappearance of evidence as under 123 and 201. The council thus concludes the arguments. If your lordship is content with these arguments, the council seeks permission to move to the prayer.
Please.
Thank you, your lordship. Wherefore, in light of the issues raised, arguments advanced, and authorities cited, it is humbly prayed before this honorable court to declare Samir, Monu, and Kalumama guilty under the aforementioned sections and or pass any order, direction, or relief that this honorable court may deem fit in the interest of justice, equity, and good conscience. For this act of kindness, the petitioner's prosecution shall, duty bound, forever humbly pray. Thank you, Your Lordship.
So the defense can start.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, respected judges. I, Counsel Shantanu, and my co-counsel Siri are appearing on behalf of the defense in the matter State versus Samir and others. The counsel seeks permission to address this bench as your lordships.
Please.
Much obliged, lordships. As your lordships are made aware of the facts of the case and statement of jurisdiction, the counsel seeks permission to begin with the contentions.
Yes.
Much obliged. Thank you, lordships. So there are three contentions that the defense will be discussing on. Those are, first, whether the stated accused persons had knowledge about the possession of the counterfeit money. Second, whether the stated accused are involved in criminal conspiracy. And last, whether the stated accused had plans to disrupt the government of India. The first two issues will be dealt by me, whereas the third issue will be dealt with by my co-counsel. So issue number one. Whether the accused had knowledge about the possession of counterfeit money. It is contended that they did not have knowledge about it being in possession of counterfeit money. It is to be noted that under Section 489B of the IPC, the burden is on the prosecution to prove that at the time when the accused was in possession of the counterfeit notes, he knew that they were forged, and mere possession of such notes does not shift the burden on the accused to prove his innocence. And this was also what was held in the case Kiran Kumar versus State of Maharashtra, wherein the knowledge or reason to believe that the note was forged has to be proved to fix the liability under sections 489B and 489C of the IPC. Further, the prosecutions, through their investigation, have not brought any substantive proof against the said accused. The proof of their extrajudicial confessions by PW1 or PW2 have very little evidentiary value. And the circumstantial evidence here also does not come into play. It's not sufficient to provide any base for providing any prudent judgment. It is to be pointed out that even though circumstantial evidences do exist, it is capable of providing two inferences. One, and in such cases, the one in favor of the accused must be accepted. In the case State of UP versus Ashok Kumar Srivastava, the Apex Court has stated that if the notes were of such nature that a mere look at them would convince anybody that it was counterfeit, such presumption could be reasonably drawn. But the difficulty is that the prosecution has not put any specific question to the appellant. Well, that was what was held in that case. And coming to this case, though the investigative agency would have the knowledge that the note were fake just by the mere look of it, it must be noted that the defense here are just laymen. They do not have any knowledge to identify fake notes just by looking at them. And along with that, they were just doing a duty that was given to them by their masters. And therefore, the FICNs were of such high quality in which the layman would find it very difficult to differentiate, though an expert would. Furthermore, the prosecution has failed to mention the mens rea present in the accused, and therefore there is no circumstantial evidence. In the case Mammootty versus State of Karnataka, it was held that when you're prosecuting someone under sections 489B and C of the IPC, without aforementioning the mens rea, the buying, selling, or being in possession of these counterfeit currency is not enough to constitute offenses against the said sections. Possessing, in these cases, mens rea is imperative to be proved. In the case Union of India versus Dharmendra Textiles, it was held that mens rea is an essential element of crime, without which the intent to prove the crime is absent, and without it cannot even be called a crime. So, hence, based on these arguments and evidence placed before the Honorable Court, it is clear that there is no mens rea present in the accused. Hence, it is humbly contended before the Honorable Court that the stated accused had no mens rea. And with these points, the counsel wants to make the court aware that since there was no knowledge on behalf of the accused on having the fake currencies nor the mens rea, they mustn't be convicted based on just statements given by the witnesses. This does not prove any evidentiary. Does not have any evidentiary value, and this is not sufficient to have to provide a judgment on it. So, if your lordships are satisfied with the first contentions, permission to start with the second one.
You are saying that prosecution has put forward those those things doesn't have any value, and they are not proving the guilty and other things. So, do you have anything to say that why they were not involved, or what the facts which proves that they were not actually having any knowledge about this?
Well, your lordship, it must be noted that these alleged accused are just common men. One is a driver, whereas another one is a farmer. They were just working for the driver, the master of Samir. So they were just given this bag by Kalu to transport it from one place to another. And moreover, in these kind of situations where previously they were already held for unlawful assembly, just because they were holding a public assembly, it should be. I mean, there's always this doubt that these kind of fake currencies could be placed by the prosecutions themselves just to bring bad light on these people as well. And the further regarding your question, the further information will be dealt with in following issue as well, your lordship.
Okay.
With your permit, I'll start with that.
Okay.
Much obliged. The second contention is regarding whether there was any criminal conspiracy, whereas it is contended that they are not involved in the criminal conspiracy. It is humbly submitted that the accused only knew each other through Kalu. In the witness statement, it was mentioned that they were affected because of the government and that gave them a negative view of the government. They merely discussed ways about which the government should approach. The programs they conducted regarding the youth conference, it was only there to motivate and uplift the society. That was the only reason why Samir was given the responsibility of collecting money, is to hold these kind of processions. And the government felt that it tarnished their image, and this filed an FIR and claimed that it was an unlawful assembly. And it is contended that the essentials of an unlawful assembly have not been met, and it is just a false FIR, only to bring bad light to the defense. In the current case, the accused were allegedly in possession of the fake currencies, but it was without their knowledge or intention to commit any crime. Now, coming to the case, state of Tamil Nadu versus Nalini. It was held that cooperation of accused with the main accused or even his knowledge regarding conspiracy would not make the accused liable for conspiracy, as the agreement is essential for the offense of conspiracy. However, the accused had no knowledge of any larger conspiracy between them, as the prosecution may suggest. The accused 1 and 2 were found in the possession of the fake currencies in the railway station. The NIA investigation report said that the accused admitted relations to the LET, but we know that these admissions don't really hold much value. They claim that the evidences were destroyed by accused 3 for preventing further investigation. We also have accused number 4 dead, and they say that accused 5 is absconding. There's no material evidence collected by the prosecution, that is the NIA, to show the respondents are liable to be held under conspiracy. The gist of criminal conspiracy offense is an agreement to break the law. The parties in such a situation, it must be established that the accused who has been charged in criminal conspiracy has had an agreement to pursue a course of conduct to commission a crime by one or more persons to the agreement. In that case, such an agreement, along with the mens rea, is necessary to prove the guilt in criminal conspiracy. We have already established that there is no mens rea that has been proved, and therefore there is no question of criminal conspiracy. Moreover, in this case, in Sukhwinder Singh and others was state of Punjab, all accused formed an assembly which can conveniently be designated as unlawful assembly, and all of them are having a common object. And this unlawful assembly committed an offense in the prosecution of the object of that assembly. Therefore, every member of that assembly is guilty of offense. Here, it is to be noted that the common object of an assembly to be termed unlawful should be that mentioned in section 141 of the IPC. None of that has been met. And again, it is only to put bad light on the defense. And they claim that the assembly was in the intention to strike terror in the minds of the people, and none of that is true. However, in the current case, all that the accused did were to have were having contact regarding the union, had no intention to commit any unlawful activity, common object to commit an offense. They did not have any knowledge of the FICNs either. The NIA are unable to prove any inferences made by them, and the only evidences provided by them are the call detail records and the investigation and witness investigations, which are also in which also you can raise eyebrows, because nothing has been mentioned about how the call detail records have been procured, or about, and they're placing too much importance on the witness statements. These things do not have much evidentiary values. So therefore, the investigation seems incomplete. They haven't followed proper procedure, and there's no proper circumstantial or direct evidence to point the same. The court must protect the accused by acquitting them of these charges filed under improper evidences. So if your lordships may permit, my co-counsel will begin with the third contention.
Please.
Thank you very much.
The council seeks permission to move on to the third contention. The third contention being whether the stated accused had plans to disrupt the government of India. Excuse me. It is submitted before the Honorable Patiala House Court, New Delhi, that the stated accused in the case, the defendants, had no plan to disrupt the government of India. It is quite clear that from the earlier contentions that the accused are wrongly being framed for the charges under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, and that there are no intention, even in the primary case of the accused, carrying the fake Indian currency notes without any knowledge. The lack of either the knowledge and the intention doesn't amount to any attempt against the government of India. The prosecution had not been able to prove its case beyond the reasonable doubt, but merely presented its speculation on the situation. The accused deny all the statements mentioned in the NIA investigation reports as the confessional statements, and the defendants who had lack of knowledge of the possession of the fake Indian currency notes are under the pressure of the NIA, charging them under the Unlawful Activities Act. The prosecution has to prove the case beyond the reasonable doubt that they have made attempts to disrupt the government. The pristine rule that the burden of proof is on the prosecution to prove the guilt of the accused should not be taken away as a faucet doctrine, as though it admits no process of intelligent reasoning. And this was also mentioned in the case of State of West Bengal versus Muhammad Omar in 2000. It is also to be noted that the police department and the NIA provided only the call detail records and the confessional statements alleged to have been made by the defendants voluntarily. Evidences presented by them are the manipulated call detail records, which hold the location of the accused in the West Bengal and other parts of the India. The CDR, also called call detail records, didn't receive any certification under 65B of the Evidence Act. And this was also not presented by the prosecution in any way. The accused had not traveled to West Bengal or any other alleged places of Indo-Bangladesh as the NIA presents. Even if the accused had been to West Bengal and the places within India, it is their right to travel to any place in India under Article 19 of Indian Constitution 1951. Upon lack of proper evidence, the NIA alleged that the incriminating evidence was unable to be recovered as Kalu at the rate Mama A3 had destroyed all the evidences as in the background of the registration of the case 17.28 and charged him under section 201 of Indian Penal Code. In the point 17.26 of the investigation of NIA, it was also mentioned that the NIA team received an information that the Sohail and had been seen with an unknown man and Kalu A3, and it was alleged that A3 was taken to Malda for pointing out the locations where they set bombs, etc. All this information provided by the NIA is baseless, and it has no evidence to prove that the accused had any plans in disrupting the government. There is no substantive nor corroborative evidences to any of the allegations made by them. In the case of Ranjit Singh, Brahmjit Singh Sharma versus State of Maharashtra and another, it was with regard to Article 21 and the light of presumption of innocence, before being proved guilty, it was observed that the Article 21 and the view of its expansive meaning not only protects life and liberty but also envisages a fair procedure. Liberty of a person should not ordinarily be interfered with unless there exists a cogent ground therefore. Hence, the Honorable Court has to consider reasonably to maintain a delicate balance between the judgment of acquittal, conviction, and an order granting bail much before the commencement of the trial. Also, in view of Section 45, Clause 2 of UAP Act, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, it is mandatory for the prosecution to place before the court the report of the authority constituted disclosing its independent review of the evidence garnered in the course of investigation. However, the NIA keeps mentioning that the accused have admitted in the custody, and that is their only evidence apart from the CDR, which has lack of certification under 65B. When there is no sufficient evidence against the accused persons, then the benefit of doubt goes in favor of the accused. It is further submitted that the statement of the witnesses recorded in the case is unnatural and it appears to be tailor-made statement. The charge sheet filed by the respondent is not even a complete one. Furthermore, we doubt if the fundamental rights of the accused were violated during the investigation of the NIA. It can also be seen from the language of Section 26 that the only exception to the rule contained under Section 26 is that any such confession which is otherwise held by Section 26 can be proved against the accused if such a confession is made in immediate presence of a magistrate. It is not the prosecution that the alleged confession before the defense witness 1, 2, 3 was made in the immediate presence of magistrate. Therefore, the same is clearly hit by Section 26 and cannot be looked into. And this was also this also had the sanctity of the case State of Assam versus Anupam. The Section 27 of Evidence Act is in the nature of a proviso or exception, which partially lifts the ban imposed by Section 25 and 26 and makes admissible so much of the information, whether it amounts to a confession or not, so relates to the fact thereby discovered when made by a person accused of an offense while in police custody. However, no such findings had been brought by the NIA. Since a confessional statement in the NIA custody cannot be treated as a statement made in the immediate presence of a magistrate while in police custody, it would be hit by Section 25 and 26 of the Evidence Act, and therefore such statement cannot be used as a legal evidence under the maker of the statement, and this was supported by the case of Karthik Chakrabarti versus State of Assam. It is also to be considered that the intention of the legislature to enact the Unlawful Activities Act is only to prevent the terrorism, and it is not the intention of the legislature that every criminal should be treated every criminal or accused must be tried under the act when the fallout of his activity does not extend beyond the normal frontiers of the ordinary criminal activity. We invite the attention of the court to Section 15 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act and submitted that in prosecution for any offense under Section 15 of the said act, there must be recovery of an incriminating materials from the accused as required from Section 43E of the said act, and in this case, except for the FICNs, no such materials of the weapons had been recovered. The accused persons are hard-earning persons leading a respectable life and having permanent residence, and further, there is no previous criminal record against them. There is, and the created one was unlawful assembly, which do not even have a base or evidence to any of the charges accused were framed for. Also, there is no chance for the accused persons to escape from the clutches of the prosecution if there is an offense done with the intention by the defendants. And since the accused had not admitted to any of the offenses and there are no proofs to prove it, we deny all the offenses. The accused admit that they were in the possession of the FICN's holding bag. However, they do not admit to any part of the terrorist attack against the India or any intention to hold the FICNs in the first place. A1 and A2 had lack of knowledge and were asked to travel from Delhi to Malda as people who had contacts. The police and the NIA are interpreting the current situation into something more than just a baseless crime. Also, the reasons assigned by the special public prosecutor in his report in another case, State of Kerala versus Ranif, it was mentioned that they're not relevant to justify for further detention of the accused respondent beyond the period of 90 days, and that being the mandate of law as envisaged in Section 43D, Clause 2, Clause B of UAP Act 1967. The accused hence requests the court to discharge them of all the cases filed by the NIA and provide justice in the current case. Thank you.
The prosecution counsel seeks permission from the court to permit rebuttal.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Lordship. A few arguments that were extended by prosecution before the court today. First of all, we receive absolutely no legal response to Section 123 and 201, which is of disappearance of evidence. Neither of the counsel address the points. They do not provide us any facts to disprove the claims and the proof that has been given by the prosecution for concealment of evidence or concealment with intent to facilitate design to wage war. Furthermore, some points that were made by the counsel in this regard. They first claim that possession does not amount to knowledge, and they cite the authority as Kiran Kumar. The same authority has been presented before the court by the prosecution, where the authority and that judgment recognized that the mannerism of the accused, insofar as they held the bag within their abdomen, was proof of the intent and the knowledge. The very authority that the respondents submit to you is the authority that shows that while mere possession does not amount to knowledge, the behavior, mannerism, and surrounding circumstances should be considered. In the given cases, the behavior and surrounding circumstances do prove knowledge and intent, as has been proven by the speeches of the prosecution previously. Secondly, the first speaker of respondents tells us that Samir and Monu were only doing duty given by masters. Counsel, Your Lordship, it is asked, who are these masters? If the professions are different, if one is a driver, the other is a farmer, who is this common master that there is? What is the common intent that they are driving? Why are they carrying out the actions and directions of a common master when there is no common profession? Why are they taking bags of 10 lakh rupees counterfeit currency without asking questions and then seeking no knowledge or intent? The burden of proof is very clearly on the respondents to prove that when a prima facie case is showing knowledge, showing intent with the facts, with the confessions, not only the confessions made in police custody, which not admissible, but then further corroborated by evidence under Section 27, and then the other evidence acts that have been cited by the respondents. It is very clear that the respondent has not fulfilled their burden to show absence of knowledge when the case is presenting the same. Furthermore, the first counsel of respondents claims that they only knew each other through Kalu Mama. That is categorically untrue based on the statement given by the defense witness. The defense witness itself in Samir and in Monu's statement say that Samir was raised by Monu's father. They have an intimate connection since childhood. That association is proven and admitted in defense witness, not in police custody, and therefore is admissible and has evidentiary value, as according to Exhibit 7 of the defense witness. Therefore, this association is proven by prosecution and further proves the knowledge, intent, and guilt of the accused. Lastly, you have the counsel of respondents claiming that there was not unlawful assembly. Your Lordship, it is presented before the court that assembly is not required. Assembly is not required to prove association. Assembly is not required to prove criminal conspiracy. All the accused are not required to be in physical assembly of each other to prove that they had common intent and common knowledge to further out the commonly intended act. Then the respondents claim that too much reliance has been placed on the witness statements. Your Lordship, it is presented before the court that other reliance has been placed on call detail records. Call detail records show continued association between Samir, Monu, Kalu Mama. Furthermore, Kalu Mama with Sohail, who has been in association with Lashkar-e-Taiba. You also have association with Samir and Monu with Peter, Peter is the accused who went absconding and then committed suicide. While absconsion is not proof of guilt, committing suicide is circumstantial evidence which has persuasive value. That is evidence that the respondents do not respond to. There is further evidence which shows that they were in geographical contact with each other, proving the very statements they made in police custody. Thus, we rely again on Section 27 of the Evidence Act, where if the confessions made in police custody are backed by circumstantial evidence and by corroborative evidence, then those statements can be admissible. And in this case, you have circumstantial evidence proving that. Lastly, the possessions that were recovered from Samir and Monu when they were arrested, they give us the counterfeit currency. There are SIM cards, there are mobile cards, and the very fact that the counterfeit currency was in the secret pocket of the bag is reflective of their guilt and their knowledge and intent. For these reasons, the prosecution presents before the court that the accused had the mens rea, the knowledge, the intent, and they committed the crime. In the absence of any substantiation from respondents about their guilt in concealment of evidence and concealment and disappearance of evidence, they should be held guilty for that as well, along with criminal conspiracy, counterfeit currency, and terrorist activities. Thank you, Your Lordship.
Okay.
The council seeks permission for rebuttal.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Your Lordship. The so-called blast code mentioned by the prosecution, and in fact just a statement made by the A5 to A3 regarding a conspiracy hatching behind them and not by them. A5, as mentioned by the NIA, is missing in action, and there could be a possible apprehension from the conspirators in connection to the A4's death and A5's lack of whereabouts. Also, the currency notes are of so high quality that the accused didn't even notice the currency were fake. The statement 1.1 mentioned under 3.1 in the prosecution memorial support the same. In this regard, the accused can help in the further investigation to rectify the fake Indian currency note situation with complete solution. And no official investigation in regards to A5, A3 and Black Kurta person crossing the borders in Indo-Bangladesh borders is done. The prosecution alleged that on the same day the Shah Rukh Khan gave a witness statement, concerned BSF officer was requested to join the investigation, but unfortunately even he could not provide any necessary information about the infiltration at the India-Bangladesh borders. There is no verified proof in regards to the breach of the national security alleged by the prosecution and the accused, and this was also supported by the NIA investigation reports. A1 and A2 hid the money in the secret compartment since they were afraid that it might get stolen in the busy trains of Farakha. Not just that, but they mentioned a case about conduct, but here it is arguably easier the way consignment was kept. So the conduct here in our case has nothing to prove the mens rea. It was just to keep the money safe, and they believe that the money was not fake, but it was actual money. The jury might doubt the method of transfer of money. In India, there is lack of awareness and trust on banks due to the elongated processes to the transfer of the money. And due to that, A3 had asked A1 and A2 to take the money from one place to another so that they could move on with their union progressing activities and not the unlawful assembly activities as reported under the FIRs in the police station. A3 sent money not as a part of sensitization programs nor the financial assistance to any militant groups. It was sent as a part of a union leader of a factory for the upliftment of the oppressed people. Also, as mentioned by the prosecution in the rebuttal, mere contacts between the people doesn't amount to any conspiracy. Criminal conspiracy had many other essentials to satisfy, which doesn't appear to be. And the prosecution states that the only details which they have given were CDR and FICNs, and they didn't provide any certification under 65B, and there is no procedures mentioned or any other procedures mentioned by them to satisfy that their CDRs are valid. The prosecution is basing a lot on the witness's statement, and we deny that it have the validity under Section 27 because the defendants deny all the statements made in the NIA investigation. And we request the court for to move on to the prayer.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Lordship. Wherefore, in the light of the case, issues raised, arguments advanced, and authorities cited, this honorable court may declare that the stated accused had no plans to disrupt the government of India. The stated accused are not involved in criminal conspiracy, nor they had knowledge about the possession of the counterfeit money, and to pass any other order in favor of the defendant counsel that may deem fit in the interest of justice, equity, and good conscience, all of which are respectfully submitted. Thank you.
Second counsel for prosecution.
Thank you all of you, and all the participants be logged out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Lordship.
Judges will remain there. Hello. Participants, be logged.
Are the participants required to leave the call?
Yeah, yes. Thank you, Your Lordship. We'll take a leave.
Thank you, Your Lordship.
Thank you.
Court must. Sir, please mark the all the mark sheet.
So in
Please do the mark sheet and sign.
see, Mr. Gupta, this team one speaker name is first speaker name.
सर आप अपने मार्कशीट मार्क्स अलॉट करके स्टूडेंट्स को अब वो साइन करके इधर यू कैन सेंड इट ऑन ईमेल या फिर आप व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप पे डाल दीजिए साथ ही के
I am not knowing about team code. Let me team code. I am not aware.
So sorry sir.
Or speak
Team
code.
Okay, I'll tell you. 511 is prosecution.
511 for first speaker.
That is prosecution, sir.
Okay.
And 553 वो defense है.
Okay. So first speaker for prosecution is 511 and the second speaker is 512.
No sir. दोनों एक speaker एक वो team है. Prosecution में दो है, एक speaker 1 है, एक speaker 2 है. ठीक है.
And for defense
में भी एक speaker एक defense है. Defense के लिए 553 team हो जाएगी. कोड है. प्रोसिक्यूशन की टीम का कोड है 511. डिफेंस का है 553.
Please, can you repeat it again?
सर ऐसा है जो 511 है ना,
उसमें दो
जैसे प्रोसिक्यूशन की तरफ से था और उसमें दो स्पीकर थे, एक रिसर्चर था. सर मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
हाँ अंकित जी, ये टीम कोड दूसरे का बताएंगे क्या है?
दूसरे का कोड है, डिफेंस का कोड है 553.
553. ओके.
डिफेंस का.
ठीक है, इसको मैं व्हाट्सएप कर दूं आपको.
उसमें भी दो स्पीकर थे, एक रिसर्चर था.
हाँ, ये मैं आपको व्हाट्सएप कर दूं.
साइन करके
इसको साइन करके व्हाट्सएप कर दीजिए.
ठीक है.
ओके.
बाय.
थैंक यू.
ग्रुप में